You're listening to Crime Wine, the daily podcast that pairs perfectly with silence and suspense. The afternoon at Madison Station was unusually crowded. It wasn't just the ordinary bustle of commuters. Today, a government recruitment exam in the nearby town of Lonesville had drawn a sea of young faces. On the wooden benches, in the waiting area, and around the electronic display boards, anxious candidates fidgeted, checking train schedules, whispering to one another. At the announcement, people poured onto the tracks, scrambling up to the train waiting at platform 3. Most passengers already had tickets, but the congestion caused by the exam crowd meant that some with reservations struggled to get aboard. At the entrance to the sleeper car, 5 passengers were stuck, trying to squeeze in. Meanwhile, the air-conditioned first-class compartment held an entirely different atmosphere. Quiet, calm. Patrons were seated comfortably on the wide, cushioned benches, waiting for the train to pull out. In compartment 13, one such passenger sat facing the window. Amresh Ashford, in his mid-50s, was a retired colonel, now a criminal psychologist and university professor. His face was broad, framed by a thick, meticulously groomed mustache curling above his lips. A small belly protruded under his crisp white shirt, and an old scar ran along his wrist, a remnant of some long-forgotten adventure. He had authored books, yet today he merely observed the crowd below with quiet disdain. From the corner of his eye, he noted the sea of faces on the platform, young, eager, tense, all caught up in the rush of life. Flipping through the pages of his English newspaper, he barely registered the passing minutes. A half-empty bottle of water sat beside him. He took 2 slow sips, then leaned out of the window, scanning the sprawling station, the old railway cars, the boundary walls of the nearby employee colony, and the occasional motorcycle parked lazily by the tracks. Suddenly, the compartment door slid open. "Hello," said a man, appearing to be in his mid-40s. Amresh looked up, slightly startled, and offered a courteous smile. The man was dressed casually, a striped collared t-shirt and blue jeans, dragging behind him a trolley bag. He settled across from Amresh, exhaling deeply as he lowered himself into the seat. For a few moments he adjusted his bag, pulled out some papers, and began scribbling in shorthand with a pen that seemed to falter in his hand. Amresh's keen eyes studied him carefully. Something about the man demanded attention, not just the movement of the pen, but the nervous way he handled the papers, flipping them over and over, as if hiding some secret. Finally the man paused, smiled, and muttered under his breath, "Let's get this done." "Your pen seems to be struggling," Amresh said quietly. The man glanced up, nodded, and handed over both pen and paper. Amresh adjusted them carefully, then returned them to the man with a faint smile. "I see you've got talent," Amresh remarked, almost to himself, watching the man begin again. The train jerked forward, leaving the city behind, giving way to endless stretches of green fields, winding paths, and a sky that seemed to go on forever. The man, noticing Amresh's attention, leaned slightly forward, curiosity twinkling in his eyes. "You seem to recognize me," he said slyly, placing his papers aside. Amresh's response was calm, deliberate. "Your time at the airport, the pattern of your movements, it all gives you away." The man smiled knowingly, lowering his trolley bag to the floor. "You've got sharp eyes, Mr. Ashford," he said. "I'm Victor Yates. I run a business in New Orleans. Just got back from a flight from Lonesville." Amresh nodded, acknowledging the introduction. Victor extended his hand, which Amresh shook firmly. Victor's eyes gleamed with a mischievous intelligence. He was about to tell a story, one that would blur the lines between truth and fiction, between morality and calculation. From his bag, he pulled out a black-covered book, its spine stained with what looked like red ink, and handed it across. "This," Victor said, is a tale of precision, a perfect plan, a perfect execution. Amresh opened the book, noting the title embossed in gold, The Perfect Mind. The pages seemed heavy with suspense, with the promise of secrets that few would dare uncover. Victor leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, and began. In a world of 7 billion, the greatest truth is this: nothing is free. Every bite of bread, every soft bed, every smile has its cost. Often, the path is twisted. Deceit, betrayal, lies become necessities. I was never born to blend in with the anonymous crowd. I acted with my mind, not my heart. That is why, in business and in life, I always stayed ahead. As Victor spoke, the story unfolded with cinematic intensity. A husband discovering his wife's affair, a carefully laid plan to confront the interloper, a chilling execution that would leave no trace, no evidence, no chance of discovery. Amresh's eyes followed every word, every gesture, as the train cut through the scenic American heartland. Rolling hills, distant mountains and fields, washed in rain, streaked past the window, a perfect backdrop for the story's tension. Victor's voice lowered, conspiratorial. The night was carefully chosen, the setting perfect. A private party on a riverboat, music, lights, celebration. But beneath the laughter, a storm brewed. I knew every move, every glance, every plan of the man who had dared cross the line. Amresh listened intently as the narrative grew darker, the suspense building with each revelation. He could feel the meticulous planning, the thrill of control, the cold, calculated precision of a mind capable of perfect murder. Victor continued, painting the scene in vivid strokes. The party, the unsuspecting guests, the DJ who would unknowingly play a role in a deadly plot, and the subtle manipulations that would turn fate toward a shocking conclusion. Every detail was exact, every character's motivation crystal clear. And yet, through it all, there was a human element, a tangle of desire, jealousy, vengeance, and fear that made the story pulse with life. The train rumbled on, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels against the rails echoing the tension in the compartment. Amresh's gaze occasionally flicked to Victor, noting the glimmer of satisfaction, the careful control of every word, every pause. By the time the train approached Lonesville, the story had reached a fever pitch. Victor's narrative, blending real-life experience with a masterful thriller, left no room for doubt. This was a mind operating at the edge of obsession, capable of calculating every outcome with chilling precision. And yet, beneath the meticulous plotting, there was an unspoken question. Could the lines between fiction and reality remain so clearly defined? Or had Victor already blurred them beyond recognition? Amresh turned the page, his mind racing. Outside, the fields and distant cityscape blurred by, but inside compartment 13, the tension was palpable, the suspense nearly tangible. Victor leaned back, finishing his tale with a calm, almost casual remark. And that, Mr. Ashford, is how the perfect plan comes to fruition. Precision, patience, control. No evidence, no suspicion, nothing left behind but the inevitability of the outcome. Amresh closed the book slowly, letting the weight of the narrative settle. He looked at Victor, a mixture of admiration and unease in his eyes. The Chicago Express continued to cut through the landscape, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended between the rhythm of the rails and the pulse of a story that was far more than just fiction. The night train from Brighton to Ashford cut through the storm like a silent predator. Rain hammered the windows, blurring the world outside, while inside the carriage, the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, throwing brief pools of stark white over rows of empty seats. Shadows shifted unnaturally, not because of ghosts, but because someone was moving deliberately in the darkness, calculating, watching. Ethan Harper sat in a corner seat, a leather briefcase at his feet, laptop open but ignored. He had carried intelligence before, but never like this. Inside the briefcase were documents that could topple governments, proof of double agents, covert operations gone wrong, and secrets certain organizations had killed to protect. He wasn't just a courier tonight. He was a target. The train shuddered over a stretch of rail, and Ethan's instincts screamed danger. He wasn't alone. The click of polished shoes against metal echoed faintly behind him. Someone had followed him onto the train. Someone trained, deliberate, silent until now. Lightning illuminated the far end of the carriage, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan saw the outline of a figure hunched against the wall. Then darkness reclaimed the space. He had seconds, maybe less, to plan his next move. The storm outside was the perfect cover. No one would notice a confrontation here. The train's hum masked subtle movements, the hiss of brakes concealing the soft scrape of someone trailing him. Ethan's hand rested on his briefcase. Every secret inside was more dangerous than any weapon he had carried. Losing it was not an option. A note slid across the aisle, almost casually, yet deliberately placed. Ethan retrieved it, heart racing. Typed in clean, impersonal font were the words, "Do not attempt to hide. You're already being watched." No signature, no origin, just a threat and a promise. He moved toward the middle of the train, eyes scanning every shadow. In the third compartment, a laptop blinked on, streaming multiple camera feeds, footage from hidden cameras inside the train. Ethan realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't random. Every move he had made, every route he had taken, had been anticipated. Someone knew exactly where he would be, right down to the seat he'd choose and the storm he'd encounter. Outside, a black van mirrored the train's route along the narrow service road. Through the rain-smeared windows of the laptop feed, a man in tactical gear monitored him. Every step Ethan took, every glance, every pause, it was all visible to him. This was no ordinary tale. This was professional, precise, deadly. The train jolted violently. Something had been placed on the tracks, deliberately. A device, perhaps, or a sabotage meant to stop him. Ethan ducked instinctively, heart hammering, but he couldn't risk panic. He had to think. Every second counted. He found a hatch beneath the floor, emergency access to the train's control mechanisms. Crawling inside, he worked quickly, drawing on knowledge he hadn't used in years. The mechanical operations of freight and passenger trains, the sensors, the emergency braking systems. Sparks flew from wires he touched. The train groaned under the strain, and Ethan realized the window to survive was narrowing. Above him, footsteps approached, measured, controlled. The operative aboard the train was closing in. Ethan paused only to glance at the monitors again. One feed showed a map of the surrounding rail lines, marked with the positions of multiple vehicles, tailing, anticipating, intercepting. The operation had layers, contingencies, and no room for error. A jolt, another flash of lightning, and the operative was suddenly visible in the corridor, a tall man, tactical gear black against the flickering lights, calm, professional. Ethan tightened his grip on a hidden sidearm in his jacket. It wasn't a bluff. If the briefcase was compromised, the consequences would be catastrophic. Nations could fall over the intelligence it contained. Ethan's mind raced. He executed a risky maneuver, using the hatch to access the undercarriage, rerouting emergency brakes to slow the train gradually. Sparks flew, metal groaned, the storm outside raging, but the plan worked. The train slowed just enough to reduce the immediate threat. The operative, expecting a straightforward interception, faltered, his timing thrown off. Moments later, the train screeched into Ashford Station. Ethan slipped into the shadows as the operative chased the train's interior, but the outside had changed. Mist hung low over the platform, and no backup units were visible. Ethan vanished into the mist, briefcase still secure, adrenaline fueling every step. From a distance, the van remained, Its lights were off, engines silent. But etched on the platform, barely visible under the rain, were the words scrawled in industrial spray. "You cannot hide. We are everywhere." Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Whoever orchestrated this operation was patient, professional, and ruthless. Every step he took now would be under scrutiny. Every contact he had could be compromised. But one truth was clear. The intelligence he carried could not fall into their hands. Failure was not an option. Not tonight, not ever. And as the mist swallowed him, Ethan Harper understood something else. The game had changed. The storm, the train, the operative. It was no longer just a delivery. It was an initiation into a world of shadows where survival required cunning, speed, and absolute certainty that your enemies were always watching. He was alone but hunted, and in the world of espionage, that was never safe.